Welcome back, everyone, to another explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into what is honestly a massive operational challenge in the life sciences industry. We're talking about how you actually run a single day-to-day quality management system, or QMS, that manages to satisfy both pharmaceutical and medical device requirements on a global scale. We're really zooming in on the operations covered in Module 8 of our source material, so we're focusing heavily on quality systems, manufacturing, and lifecycle management for combination products. If you've ever had to manage a drug-device combo, you already know we are dealing with a totally unique beast here.
So, the core question we have to figure out today is this. How do you manage a product that is currently living in two completely different regulatory worlds at the exact same time? The tension here is super real. Think about it. If you build two entirely separate quality systems, one for the drug, one for the device, you're just duplicating effort. You waste time, you waste money, and you create these confusing internal silos. But on the flip side, if you try to take shortcuts and only follow one set of rules, you're going to create massive compliance gaps that could literally jeopardize your entire product globally.
And this brilliantly illustrates the historical divide we're trying to bridge. Over in the pharma world, which is governed by drug CGMPs in the US and EV-Duralex GMP in Europe, everything is strictly focused on things like batch records, in-process controls, stability testing, and proving shelf life. But meanwhile, over in the device world, which runs on the US QMSR and ISO 1345, the focus completely shifts. Over there, it's all about design controls, CAPA, and keeping a really tight device history file. And the kicker? Both of these frameworks apply simultaneously to your combination product.
Okay, so how do we actually build a practical solution? The goal here is to build one unified matrix system. But what does one QMS actually mean when you're on the floor day to day? Well, it means you have one set of procedures that map back to both of those frameworks. Take CAPA, for example. It's a huge, strict expectation in both the device and pharma worlds. So instead of running two separate systems, you run one shared CAPA system. Why? Because a root cause might actually cross the boundary between the drug and the device. The exact same logic applies to having a single control documentation system and ensuring cross-disciplinary training so your pharma and device teams actually speak the same language. You're creating one seamless system, and you only apply those constituent-specific controls when it is absolutely required.
Real quick, before we get too deep into the operational weeds, I just need to flag a really critical regulatory update for your QMS. As of February 2nd, 2026, the U.S. Device Quality System Regulation is the QMSR. That officially incorporates the international standard ISO 13485-2016 by reference. Basically, it means the old QSR framing you might be used to using is officially out of date.
All right, Section 1. Managing complex supply chains, specifically controlling CMOs and material suppliers. Now that we've got the internal foundation set, we need to look outside the four walls of your company. Because let's face it, a combination product is rarely built entirely under one roof. You might have one company making the auto-injector, a totally different fill-finish site handling the drug, and then a final assembler putting the whole shebang together. It makes managing your supply chain incredibly complex.
Bringing all those external partners under your QMS umbrella requires some seriously robust purchasing and supplier controls. In fact, purchasing controls are a specific U.S. Part 4 device callout. You have to follow a really rigorous 5-step supplier oversight lifecycle. First, you comprehensively assess and qualify the supplier. Second, you agree on strict specs. Third, you do risk-based audits to make sure their quality system actually works in practice. Fourth, you continuously monitor their performance. And finally, step 5, you requalify them periodically. It's a continuous loop.
Okay, let's dive into the specific mechanism of control, the quality agreement. This is the document that dictates the exact operational split between you, the application holder, and your contract manufacturing organization. It's all about who does what. You, the holder, set the specifications, and the site has to meet them. For change control, the site notifies you, but you are the one who actually approves the change. And for complaints or deviations, the site reports them, sure, but you have to assess the impact. The golden rule here is that you never, ever transfer regulatory accountability. You are only outsourcing the task itself.
Moving on to Section 2, the Change Control Ripple Effect, featuring the Helix Vitalis case study. This honestly brings us to what might be the absolute trickiest part of combination product lifecycle management. We're going to use a fictional case study to show you the butterfly effect of change management across different global rules.
Picture this. You're working at a company called Helix Vitalis, and a colleague pops by your desk. They say they want to update the auto-injector's activation spring. They're like, hey, don't worry. It's literally just a minor device tweak to make the pen click better. No regulatory impact at all. So what do? Should you just give them the green light to implement this on the manufacturing line?
The answer is a resounding absolute no. When you are dealing with a combination product, you never treat a device change as just device only. If you act on that and implement a change in production before you confirm its regulatory classification, you are completely bypassing your safety controls. Doing that can trigger major global compliance failures, product recalls, and land you some very serious regulatory citations.
Let's actually trace this out to see exactly how a single, tiny hardware change cascades through your entire QMS. Changing that spring, it forces you to open up the design history file to re-verify the activation force. Then, you have to open the risk file under ISO 1497 to reassess if this new spring changes the hazard of giving a partial dose. Then you've got to look at human factors to see if the user's interaction has changed. And crucially, you have to assess both your US and EU filings. One simple spring change literally touches almost every core file in your integrated quality system.
Now, what's really interesting here is the totally divergent regulatory paths for that exact same spring change. Over in the US, you're assessing reportability to the FDA under those Part 4 guidelines. But in Europe, a change to the device part might require your notified body to revisit its Article 11.7 opinion, which then triggers a whole variation to the marketing authorization application. The thresholds for approval and the timelines, they differ wildly between the US and the EU. You absolutely need one global tracker to sequence these submissions perfectly, because if you don't, you risk massive supply gaps where you're legally allowed to sell in one market, but not the other.
Which brings us to Section 3, navigating inspections and sustaining readiness in the US and EU. Look, building this unified QMS is only step one. Proving to global regulators that your integrated system is actually functioning correctly day in and day out, that's step 2.
When an inspector finally walks through your door, you need to know exactly which lens they are looking through. In the US, the FDA inspects a combination product using one single combined CGMP lens, and that's driven by the lead center associated with the primary mode of action. But over in the EU, you are dealing with a dual overseer system. A national competent authority handles the medicinal GMP, while a totally separate notified body assesses the device part's conformity under Article 117. And remember this, while shared standards like ISO 1345 definitely make life easier, shared standards do not equal shared laws. You have to prove compliance separately for each jurisdiction.
So how do you keep this giant dual compliance system alive every day? You sustain the life cycle through continuous monitoring and trending. You take all that post-market data, things like complaints and deviations, and you rigorously feed it right back into your shared risk and CAPA systems. You do periodic product quality reviews that deliberately look at both the drug and device constituents together. And you have to maintain absolutely meticulous configuration control, so you always know exactly which device revision and which drug formulation are currently sitting on a pharmacy shelf.
So the crucial point is captured perfectly in this mindset shift right here. Compliance is a state of control, not a launch event. An integrated quality management system isn't just a box you check to get regulatory approval. It is a living, breathing mechanism designed for continuous lifecycle management. It is all about maintaining that state of control every single day.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative question to test your own day-to-day operations. If your component supplier decides to change the elastomer grade in your auto-injector's plunger tomorrow, and they do it without telling you, is your QMS integrated enough? Are your purchasing controls tight enough? And is your change management robust enough to catch the ripples before a regulatory inspector does? That right there is the true test of a unified QMS. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep building those bridges.